نبينا وحبيبنا وقرة أعيننا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Within this blessed month, Rabi al-Awwal, is reciting from the book of al-Shama'il al-Muhammadiyya, or as it's known as Shama'il al-Tirmidhi, written by or gathered by the great scholar of Hadith, al-Imam al-Hafiz Abu Isa ibn Sawr al-Tirmidhi, the same Hafiz or the same Imam who gathered the collection of Jami' al-Tirmidhi, one of the main 6 books of Hadith that we have in our tradition. And he made this small book with his intention of just putting in it all of the hadith that he was aware of that described the Prophet ﷺ. And for as long as I can remember, and for as long as it's known, within this month, the scholars would always like to recite from this book with the intention of reminding people of the Prophet ﷺ, especially in a month where he was born and where he performed his hijrah and where he passed away ﷺ. And many of his main events occurred within his lifetime within this month. So it's nice to read from this book and kind of remember him and go through him. So I'll be choosing, I forgot my book in the maktab. Someone will get it for me, inshallah. I'm going to choose from each paragraph, inshallah, one or two or maybe 3 hadith, depending on how big the section is. And I'll just recite the hadith from you as the sunnah of reciting books of hadith. This is how books of hadith are taught and done, by the way. And Sheikh Ziyad can correct me if I'm wrong, but the Sheikh would sit, the muhaddith or the hafiz, and then the students would sit and they would recite from the book, and he would correct their recitation, and then they would also explain the gharib, and that's how you would take the sanad of a book, and that's how we studied these books. And I'm giving you a taste of it by just reciting a few hadith. I don't have to look at the book, but it's just, I think there's barakah in doing that. So I'll narrate for you 2 of these hadith tonight. They're short, inshallah. فقال الشيخ الحافظ أبو عيسى محمد بن عيسى ابن سورة الترمذي رضي الله عنه ونفعنا بعلمه قال حدثنا محمد بن بشار العبدي قال حدثنا محمد بن جعفر قال حدثنا شعبة عن أبي إسحاق قال سمعت البراء بن عازب يقول رضي الله عنه كان رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم رجلا مربوعا. So al-Bara ibn Azib is the one who's narrating this hadith for us, and the hadith is a collection of Imam Bukhari. And he says the Prophet ﷺ was a man marbu'an. Marbu'an means he was not neither extremely tall nor clearly short. He was somewhere in between, closer to being on the taller side. That's what marbu' means. بعيد ما بين المنكبين. The distance between the tips of his shoulders was quite wide. He had broad shoulders, alayhi salatu wasalam. This is literal, and this is also figurative in describing him, alayhi salatu wasalam. And rarely does a man get described with having broad shoulders if it's just a physical thing. I mean, if a man is ever going to be described, especially for the Arabs, as having broad shoulders, it's going to be something physical. It's also going to be something figurative, meaning he is someone that you could depend upon. He is someone that you could lean on when needed. بعيد ما بين المنكبين صلى الله عليه وسلم. عظيم الجمة. He had a full head of hair. So alayhi salatu wasalam, his hair was thick. If left and he didn't cut it, or he had a large, his head had a well-sized head with a full set of hair. Alayhi salatu wasalam. إلى شحمة أذنيه. Sometimes he'd let it go down from the top of his head as far as the end of his ear. So the length of one hair from his forehead would go back down here. And in other narrations, it would go even longer than that, alayhi salatu wasalam. All of this he did. He shaved his head for Hajj, alayhi salatu wasalam, and Umrah multiple times, and he had the long hair, and he had everything in between. Alayhi hullatun hamra. Once I saw him, he's what Bara ibn Azib is saying. I saw him once wearing a hulla, meaning a piece of clothing, a garment, hamra, that has red in it. So usually hamra is red. So most scholars, it's not a full red piece of clothing, but there was red stitched into the coloring of it, so you could see the red within it. يقول, and this is why I'm narrating this, I chose this hadith. He continues, he says, ما رأيت شيئا قط أحسن منه. I never saw anything in my life that was more beautiful in my eyes than him. Not anyone, anything. I never saw in my life anything that was more beautiful and more perfect than him, alayhi salatu wasalam. Just the way he was, just the way he sat and the way he just sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Rawahu al-Imam al-Bukhari wa Muslim. I'll narrate one more to you and then I'll let you go, inshallah ta'ala. is one of my favorite. And this hadith is narrated by Imam Tirmidhi himself, and he has it in his own collections also. These are all sahih. I'm skipping out any hadith that has any form of weakness to it, even though I told you even the weak hadith in this book are correct in their meaning, but I'm just skipping them for lack of, just for there's no need. قال إمام الترمذي حدثنا محمد بن إسماعيل حدثنا أبو نعيم. So by the way, when he says حدثنا محمد ibn Ismail, that's Imam Bukhari, because Imam Tirmidhi was his student. Right? قال حدثنا أبو نعيم حدثنا المسعودي عن عثمان بن مسلم بن هرمز عن نافع بن جبير بن مطعم عن علي بن أبي طالب رضي الله تعالى عنه قال and this is the description of Sayyidina Ali. So the last one was the description of Sayyidina al-Bara ibn Azib, and this is the description of Sayyidina Ali ibn Abi Talib, his cousin alayhi salatu wasalam, and someone who was his son-in-law and his son as well. قال لم يكن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم بالطويل ولا بالقصير. He wasn't someone very tall, he wasn't someone very short. شثن الكفين والقدمين. So the word shathn means that his hands, alayhi salatu wasalam, were large. They weren't thick as in sausage fingers, but they were tall and they were sturdy. So they weren't fingers that were so thin that you could just break them off, but they weren't sausage fingers either. That was shathnul kaffain. So they were thick and they were proper and they were sturdy, alayhi salatu wasalam. Large hands and sturdy hands, alayhi salatu wasalam. ضخم الرأس. He had a well-sized head. ضخم الكراديس. Al-Kurdus is basically the end of the bone. So ضخم الكراديس meaning he had sturdy, large joints, alayhi salatu wasalam. طويل المسربة. Al-Masruba is basically the hair that runs down the middle of the chest, right, to the navel. That's called a masruba. And for him, alayhi salatu wasalam, he didn't have a hairy chest. He had some hair at the top of his shoulders, just up here, alayhi salatu wasalam. And then nothing else aside from that, except for a line of hair that ran right down the middle. If ever he went to swim or something, he would see طويل المسربة عليه الصلاة والسلام. There'll be another hadith where I describe a few more things, so I'll leave it till then. إذا مشى تكفأ تكفؤا كأنما ينحط من صبب. When he walked, alayhi salatu wasalam, you would feel that he was walking downhill all the time. Like it always felt like he was walking downhill. He put his foot on the ground properly, and he was moving quickly. You always had to kind of try to keep up with him. You were going uphill, but it felt like he was going downhill, alayhi salatu wasalam. And then he would say, Sayyidina Ali, قال لم أرى قبله ولا بعده مثله صلى الله عليه وسلم أجمعين. Said, I never saw anything or anyone before him or after him that was like him, alayhi salatu wasalam. I have never seen anything. لم أرى قبله ولا بعده. Before him, I never saw anyone like him. And after he left, I never saw anyone like him, alayhi salatu wasalam. And that's just the feeling that they would have. It's just a feeling. The reason I tell this hadith, because I can just in one session use all the descriptions, like the worded descriptions of how he looked, alayhi salatu wasalam. But the reason I'm narrating for you the hadith, because at the end of each of these hadith, they say something. They see what they describe. Arabs do this. They describe the objective, and they say what they feel. Right? So Sayyidina al-Bara, he described the objective, and he said, ما رأيت شيئا قط أحسن منه. I never saw anything more beautiful than him, alayhi salatu wasalam. Sayyidina Ali described the objective, and he said, لم أرى قبله ولا بعده مثله. I never saw anyone before him or after him that was similar to him, alayhi salatu wasalam. Is how they felt about him, alayhi salatu wasalam. It was a feeling, and I love to recite these ahadith so I can listen to the feeling of the Sahabi, because you and I didn't have the barakah or the blessing of being able to be there physically with him, alayhi salatu wasalam. But we have the advantage of listening to the testimonies of the people who did. You get to listen to how they felt about him. And that should mean something to you, because that's how people are known. Right? People are known by how those who were close to them felt about them during their lives and after they passed away. And that's why this is one of the longest sections of the whole book, of just listening to the Sahaba testify to how they felt about this man, alayhi salatu wasalam. And I love this description that Sayyidina Ali puts there. We'll end with that. We'll continue inshallah in the next time. سبحانك وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك وصلى الله وسلم وبارك وعظم على نبينا وحبيبنا وقرة أعيننا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته.